Hi, this is Gabe from towerofbabelfish.com. This is a video walkthrough of the English pronunciation IPA deck. As I talk about a lot on the site, you're going to remember cards you've made yourself better because you've had this experience of finding all the information and designing these cards. My goal here is to give you a quick overview of the cards I've made in order to kind of replace that experience of making them yourself. Hopefully by going through what I've done here, you can start out familiar with all of the cards right from the beginning and still save yourself time by using my deck instead of making your own. So let's start. I'm just going to show one side of each card. And you'll see that I'm looking at 71 cards here instead of the 121 that are in the deck. So this is just to save us some time. Each one will start out either with this on the front or this back side on the front. They all have sounds in them, at least all of the ones with a symbol. I go pa, a, pa, or p, a, pa. So I'm saying the symbol alone, and then I'm saying it in between two vowels. So a, p, a. I have three examples in English. Usually I start with one in the beginning, one in the middle, and one in the end. You'll find in some languages that if a consonant comes at the end, it changes its sound. In English, this is not the case, and so we have this consonant all the way through. I've put this always on the back of the card on both sides. Even if you see the English example on the front, you're still going to see the voicing in place and manner on the back. P is a voiceless thing, it's a bilabial thing, both of your lips, and it's a plosive thing. I've written in that it's aspirated. In this case, English uses p. It uses a bunch of air coming out. This isn't the case in every language, and so in things like French and especially Italian, appa, instead of appa. German is aspirated, for example, and Italian is not. So here's b, abba. I'm going to shut off the sounds for a while. And so you get butt, abdominal web. Again, beginning, middle, and end of the word. This is the voiced version of P, and you can see they're all the same, except that B switches to non-aspirated. B isn't aspirated anymore. All of the voiced plosive consonants in English aren't really aspirated. Here we have T, same sort of thing as P. You'll see it starts beginning, middle, end. It's voiceless. In this case, it's alveolar, and that's the only thing that's changed. D, same thing. You'll notice that it switches to non-aspirated because it's voiced. And G, same thing. This is just, I'm switching place. I'm going to velar, but these are all plosives. K, same thing. Voiceless, aspirated. F is now our first fricative in the series. This is Labial Dental, so this is between your lips and your teeth, and it's voiceless. You'll see that I have a few examples of different spellings in English. F is spelled sometimes with GH. V doesn't have this problem of spelling, although sometimes VE is just pronounced V, as in have. S is our first sibilant. I describe these in the videos as fricative, but I've sort of added this extra information. Sometimes linguists like to be really specific, and so these S and Z sort of sounds, they create this high-pitched sibilant sound where the air hits right at the edge of the teeth and makes a whistling, turbulent sound. If you don't want that in your deck, if you don't really care, which you don't need to care, you can click up here, which will access the editor, and you can just delete this stuff like that. I'm not going to. While we're in the editor, if you decide you don't want to hear the sounds, because the examples are enough for you and you want to go a little faster, you don't want to wait to hear these sounds, or you want to be able to review these on your iPhone and not have me say sa in the middle of a subway, just delete this tag. This is the reference that tells the card where to find the sound. If you just delete this, the sound will go away permanently unless you want to put it back in which case you'd write bracket sound colon and the name of the MP3. I'm going to leave it in for now. You're going to hit Z, which is the voiced version of this, also sibilant, sometimes spelled with an S. H is always spelled with an H in English. There's never an H at the end, at least not that I know of. Pretty straightforward. These are our first nasal consonants. Again, beginning, middle, end. And same thing. Sh is our first post-alveolar sound. They talk about this being palatal alveolar. This just means that it is post-alveolar, meaning that the top of your tongue is right behind the alveolar ridge, but the back of your tongue is raised a little bit, and so not the back, the middle. The middle of your tongue is sort of touching your soft palate a little bit. Sh, sh in English. It's raised more than just a pure post-alveolar sound. Again, this is extra information that you don't necessarily need, but I just figured I'd put it in there. If you don't want it, just delete it. There's nothing that's going to hurt you by thinking that this is a post-alveolar sound. It is a post-alveolar sound. Again, this is spelled sometimes with SH, but sometimes just with S or T. There's all sorts of spellings in English for the same sound. Je is same thing. You'll notice I've also put in its palatal alveolar. It's in the same place as sh. Je, sh. Th is straightforward. This is a dental fricative, voiceless. Always spelled TH. And the, same thing, always spelled TH. Is It's a velar nasal consonant. This is straightforward. Okay, ch. Let's talk about ch. Ch is the first affricate. This is a plosive sound, the t, this first t, connected to a fricative sound, sh, sh. And so you put them together and you get ch, ch. Sometimes they'll write them together, or they'll put a circle, a half semicircle on top or on bottom. This is basically just to show that the sounds are connected. You don't put a space in between in English. You don't go t, sh, or something. It's always together, ch. The place here is palatal alveolar. This is because we're talking about two sounds at once. The t is alveolar, and the sh is actually post-alveolar or palatal alveolar, where the tongue is right behind the alveolar ridge, and the middle of the tongue is kind of up at the soft palate. Sh, sh. And so they have a slightly more specific place. This is only just to kind of be more specific. J is just the voiced version of the same thing. You'll notice that you'll see these sort of things written together again. Y is our first approximant. Nothing much to say there. W is our labiovelar, which I talk about in the video, where the lips are rounded like an U, and the back of the tongue is also raised to a soft palate. This is our glottal stop. It's never spelled. I've sort of written it in this little dash, uh-oh, or nuh-uh, or button. It's not spelled in English except when it's with T's, but it is there, and you'll find it in things like German. German starts most words in German that start with a vowel will start with a glottal stop. So you'll get eins instead of eins or something. Ich habe eine, they have glottal stops everywhere. L is an alveolar sound, but it's also velarized for American dialects. And so this you'll see rarely. This is an L with a little squiggly through it to say that it's velarized. L, L. In general, when you see English in a dictionary, in a pronouncing dictionary, you'll see it just written as an L. But you should know that there's a difference between this L and an L you'll find in, let's say, French or Italian. Again, this is a lateral approximant. We talk about that in the video. Is our alveolar approximant. Nothing much to say here, although in many English pronouncing dictionaries and things like that, you will find it written upright. You'll find it written like this. You should know that in English, in general, these are approximants. This isn't, if it was written upright technically, if you saw something like this, instead of the upside down one, this is a rolled R. This is run and siren, which you would find in a Scottish accent, but most people don't have Scottish accents. Here we're getting into vowels, and so I've included the height, the backness, and the roundedness. This is going to be covered in video 3. I've written some notes about different dialects. I'm assuming either an American or British received pronunciation dialect. Most UK people are going to be at least able to recognize what received pronunciation is supposed to sound like because they have it on their news. In general, the BBC speaks in received pronunciation. I've written things about the Australian dialects, and so anything that has a note is going to diverge from the other dialects. If there's no note, it's accurate for both received pronunciation in Britain and general American. which is sort of a mix of West Coast and East Coast, and is what you would expect to hear on the news. And so this is father. In spa, the Australian dialects use an open front unrounded ah. It's a little more father and father. I'm not going to promise to do a perfect Australian dialect, but it's more frontal. Instead of is It's the same in every language, in every dialect almost. Cat and ran. As in bed. This is open mid. This is all covered in the third video. Again, Australian dialects go a little more closed, actually. And so you'll get bed instead of bed. Some dictionaries will write, even for British received pronunciation, this closed mid e. This is true. The British in general will pronounce this more closed, and so instead of bed, you'll get bed. But you're not going to get as closed as you'll see in German. People don't really say bed very often. Some Australian dialects, they do. E is E. Everyone says E just about the same. I as in sit or bid, again, is just about the same in most dialects. U as in put. Some dialects of English will not round this quite so much, and so I say put. Some people will say put, with slightly less rounded lips, but in general, it's pretty consistent across all the dialects of English. Put. Only Australian dialects have some differences here, which is fascinating. I've never heard run. I guess that does exist, but in general, the sound is run instead of run. Oo is about the same everywhere. Aw is interesting because it doesn't actually exist in my dialect, the Californian dialect. In general, I say father, law, and dog. I have to really think to round it and go dog and law instead of dog and law. Australian dialects will sometimes use a closed O, which is fascinating. They go dog and law. But in general, this is going to be the open mid, rounded back, dog. This is our schwa. Careful here. The schwa is the unstressed obscure vowel. We'll talk about that a lot in the third video. In English, this changes from language to language, and in English you're usually going to find something pretty similar to the sound in as in but or sun. And so you'll hear about and the boat. This symbol is used in almost every language because there's an unstressed vowel in most languages, but in general it's going to change in sound depending on the language. In general, the French one is more in direction of je veux. Le deux guerriers. There's actually les deux guerriers, but still, the le sound in French is not. You can't say about. You will sound French actually, and in German you'll find it's more in direction of or Liebe. So be careful here. This is the schwa for English. The one I've recorded here is for English. This is the R flavored schwa. Or R-colored schwa, winner letter. I've written in this is only for American dialects. In general, for British received pronunciation, you're going to have winner, letter, and they're not going to go to the winner letter sound. This is the stressed R-colored. Instead of turkey, you're going to get turkey, bird. This again is a typical American sound, the R-colored I have the other symbols for the other dialects as well. If you don't want these, if you don't speak received pronunciation, for example, and you just don't want to have any reference with it, then if you click here, you're going to find your browser. These are all of your cards, and this will jump straight to this character. Anything you want to deactivate, just click here to the suspend button, and click here for the second example for the opposite direction. Anything that's yellow, you're not going to see ever again. It's it's sort of suspended from your deck, it's on hold. If you want to turn it back on, you can do that, certainly. But anytime you see a sound that you think, okay, I have no connection with this, I've never heard this sound before, and I never will again, you don't need to learn it, and so just suspend it. I think that's probably best. We just talked about this. This is bird and turkey from Received British Pronunciation. This is the not R-colored version of it. This is a difficult sound for me to pronounce. Not, wasp. It's basically an ah with a rounded lips. Not, wasp. In general, American dialects use the open, unrounded version of this. Ah, not, wasp. And some Australian dialects will use a rounded version, but they'll make it even more closed, and so you get not, wasp. So I read. I'm not that familiar with Australian dialects. Here are first diphthongs. Here you have two sounds here. My. You'll notice that the ah is actually much more, is a frontal vowel. Instead of my or something, you go my. The back ah is the one that you'll hear in father, and the diphthong is much more frontal, my. For Australian dialects, they do use the back vowel, and they go ah, but then they go, instead of going to I, they go I, for words like this, my. Oi, boy, is another diphthong. Australian dialects go to o instead of o, so they go boy instead of boy, boy. Ow is in loud or now. Australian dialects, this is really hard because I just don't speak Australian well enough, but still, they go now, loud. There's a more ah sound to it. O, in general, this is covered in a later card, but the Americans will say no, toe, and Received British Pronunciation uses o, o. They have this little schwa again, o. Here's o, no. Ear, near, and here. Again, just the main difference here between American and British is going to be this R-flavored schwa, R-colored schwa. So instead of near, you're going to have nia. Here's nia. Ur, tour, lure, same thing. It's just the R-colored schwa that changes. Tour and tour. Air, again, R-colored schwa switches in the British Received Pronunciation. So you get hair instead of hair. This is the long symbol. It doesn't have any sound, really. It makes the previous sound longer. This doesn't show up in English very much. Some dialects in general will say see and then sit. And the vowel in see is longer than the I in sit. But in general, this doesn't show up in English. What you'll find is this absolutely does show up in most languages. Italian has double consonants that use this a bunch. German has long vowels. There are many languages that have vowels that are longer than other ones. Hungarian is a mess. The vowels are, and Czech, the vowels change. The words can change depending on whether you say the vowel for a long time or a short time, even if it's the exact same vowel. It's very difficult to hear. This is a symbol that's sometimes used. You have this example, language. This will sometimes separate the two syllables. You have lang and gwij. It's not always used. And if you don't want it, again, just find it in your browser and suspend it. This is the stress symbol. And it's very important. This one is important for every language, pretty much. There are some languages that don't really use stress, like French in general will not. They don't really have strong stresses in words. But there are many languages that do, and English is one of them. And so you can't really say language. In general, you say language and pronunciation. So you'll put this mark right before the syllable that you need stressed. Here is some overview of the places. You have the bilabial place. I've marked basically on the same diagram I used in the videos, and I've made a couple examples here. You have, as in bill or pill, you use both of your lips here. These are lips. I have a word description and a picture description. Same thing here, alveolar. I have all these examples from English, and this is the tip of your tongue, basically, and the alveolar ridge. Velar is the back of the tongue and the back of your soft palate, as in kill or gill. And Labial Dental is right here in face and vase. This is the bottom lip against your teeth. Glottal is right back at the vocal cords. Uh-oh and hi are both glottal examples. Post-alveolar is a bit behind the alveolar ones, as in sure or beige. Dental is as in th and the. Again, is with tongue and your teeth. I've included palatal alveolar. Just since it's in the deck, I figured I might as well include it. And so this again is beige and sure, and it's just a little more accurate than post-alveolar. It's just to say that the front of the tongue is bunched up around the alveolar ridge, a little bit behind, and the middle of the tongue is at the soft palate, basically like a palatal vowel. Sure or sure, je, beige. Palatal is just the middle of the tongue and up here. Examples would be y. Plosives these are now the manners. The air is blocked for a moment and then released, as in tire, dire, pile, bile. Fricative are these frictiony guys. This is in face and vase, sit and zap. These are where the air channel is very narrow, but enough that air can get through. Nasal ones are where the air channel is blocked off completely and come out your nose. Mouse, nose, sing. Approximants are closed somewhat, but not as much as fricative. We only have 3 in English: yes, wake, and rake. Taps are not really in English, but I've included all the manners here just so you have them. Some dialects will use it. You'll sometimes hear, instead of latter, you'll hear ladder. And so the T's actually turn into an R flap. This will show up in many languages, like in Italian, you'll have caro, where it's actually a different word than carro. And so, yeah, these are momentary plosives. Trills, again, are not really in English unless you talk about Scottish, where you can talk about bring me some whatever. The main ones that are important are the uvular R in French and German, rond, rouge, and the Spanish-Italian sort of rolled R, carro, I guess I already talked about. Lateral approximants are the L-type things, as in lake. Just be aware that lateral approximants don't always have the velar component like in American English, so it isn't always lake, but sometimes allo, things like this. Lateral fricatives are rare, very rare, but they're cool. This is where the tongue's closed off, but you're not letting air flow over your tongue easily, and so it has to rub up against your teeth, and it makes this sort of sound. Lateral flaps, again, don't really exist in English. I covered them in the, I think, second video. Ramen. It's hard for me to do. This exists in Japanese. This exists in a few languages where it's sort of a momentary L. And that is it. That is the entire English IPA deck. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you learn a lot from it. The deck should help you learn the IPA. You should be able to recognize the IPA symbols and hear them in your head, so that if you see a word in IPA in a dictionary, you should be able to hear what that sounds like. And you should be able to go from sounds that you hear back to the IPA. And so if you hear a P, you should remember, oh, that looks like a P in IPA. The goal of this is to do is that you should be able to understand what English does in order to understand what other things do. And so when you see an English word written in IPA and you see a French word written in IPA, it'll be really clear what the differences are, because the vowels will be different or the consonants will be different. That's the real goal here. And so this is sort of a start in getting a basis in pronunciation. I hope you enjoy, and until next time, thanks.